So I was at AI Summit last week before, maybe part of London Tech Week. Anyway, so I missed Mr. Starmer and his speech, but I was there a couple of days later, and I thought it was fascinating, really, because not a lot seems to have changed in terms of the way people are feeling or experiencing kind of the AI vendor sphere. So I think if you've ever been to one of these events, Kev, you must have been to something like this at some point. Where you go in and you've got this massive trade show basically happening in the middle, and then around there is a bunch of theatres, they call them, but they're basically seminar rooms of various sizes between about 200 and 50 people, depending on which tier you're in and what the topic is, and you can go on to various talks. And typically, and what's happened in the last few years at these kind of events is that the trade show is full of cybersecurity type people, selling the fear of the AI invasion that's coming and why you spend lots of money in stopping that. All very sensible. Make sure you're protected. So that's kind of full of all that stuff. And then the talks are various different high level big vendor types, basically telling everybody you're miles behind. You need to get on the train. You're about to become extinct. We're all doing some really cool stuff. Aren't we great? That's the
Yep.
general gist of
Yep.
what these things going on. And but actually on the ground, like the various people I was talking to, people I sat next to, you could tell from kind of the grumbles and the little sideways laughs that were coming when these big statements were coming out. Is that everyone is really still in that pilot kind of experimental phase. They've all got Copilot licenses, but they're not really seeing any value beyond I can transcribe a meeting now and summarize my
Yeah.
emails. And I say the vendors are really pushing this FOMO that everyone is really far ahead and you're really far behind. And so this sense of I don't know what to do and everyone's beating me and I don't know where to go next. I mean, cost was a huge topic that came up a lot, and obviously the change, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, the change of cost model and tokens and how do you do FinOps on these things and that kind of stuff. And obviously security and compliance and some of the things we've been rolling out to our clients. That's obviously the big thing is how you keep compliance happy, how you make it secure, how you make sure you understand the data's in the right place and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But it felt like that was still the conversation that was happening 12 months ago.
Interesting, right? So we are in 2026. We're 4 years on from the ChatGPT
Is it
debut.
really? Is it really 4 years?
Right. So 4 years, which seems, in one sense, it's a long time. It sounds like a long time, and in another sense, it's not that long at all, really. If you're thinking about change, a year ago, we were talking about how 90% of, or 90% plus of proof of concept fail. And now I think we're very much past the proof of concept phase, but we're still hearing headlines like, oh, 95% of businesses don't feel like they've got any ROI. And now, as you said just then, all the costs are going up. So we're spending more and more and more on AI, but we can't see that translating directly to results on the bottom line. And I was talking to a friend on the weekend, and he was suggesting, and I've heard this before, we're using AI in our business, and we've got Copilot, and it's good. I like it. I can, it helps me to think about things, and it helps me to run my emails. I'm like, oh god, it sounds like so 2025, you know? And I'm just really aware that there are definitely two types of AI user and two types of experience with AI, A and B. And most people are still in the A group. And that is, I use ChatGPT, I type some prompts in, it gives me some stuff back. Maybe I upload an Excel file or a PDF or whatever, and it does some rudimentary analysis. And then I take that analysis and I either think about that and how I'm going to incorporate that into my work, or I copy and paste that into something, an email or a document. It's still, in that A category, most people are still in the copy paste AI group. And I think, as we've talked about on here before, the game has changed, and the people in the B group, which are much, much, much smaller, understand that AI can be labor and that the agents used correctly can be given, you can totally outsource your work to that. And so you've got these people in the B group that are just, which are probably the people that you were meeting at the conference. They're talking about how wonderful it is and how they're all so far behind. Because in a sense, that's true. That is true because most people are still in that A group.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And also, I think that bizarrely, the people in the A group, I think actually, so the very simple copy and pasting type entry level where it all begins type group. Those are the people that seem to be most concerned about the potential impact, as far as they're concerned, of the costs and how they really need to get a hand on the costs and the FinOps side of it. Completely valid, right question to be asking. But the people being impacted by the changing costs really are the people in the B group
Yeah.
who started their journey 2 years ago and are now they've got tasks that are just running all the time, just churning tokens in the background overnight. I've seen their costs do this.
Well, I saw a really interesting thing on X by a guy that works for like an AI native first line support kind of company, I think. And it's in the States, but he published all his kind of AI spend by department. And because they are in that B group, right, the majority of their work is done by AI agents or people that are orchestrating AI agents. It was kind of interesting because uh, they had it broken down by the engineering department, the sales department, the support department, blah, 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 blah. Top of the list, unsurprisingly, was the engineering department. Cost per head in AI tokens per month was $3,200.
Okay.
$302,000 per person per month on AI spend. And not far behind, I think in second place, was support. So the people actually doing the support and the tickets, because that was largely, I guess, run by the agents. Mm, that was also in the kind of 3,000 zone. And then you had kind of the sales department and the marketing department, which were down in the kind of low hundreds. So like a real difference in where that spend was, but also, the headline figure there is pretty damn high, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're talking. I mean, that's a third of a salary, half a salary type territory, isn't it? It's that kind of scale, which is not what people were sold at the beginning. But I was thinking about this because I was wondering whether or not, because it feels like with the change in prices, the early adopters and the people that are kind of really pushing the boundaries about what agents can really do in the real world at the moment are the ones that are being stung by this change in costs, and that is inevitably going to put the brakes on, both in terms of what they are able to do, but also whether or not the people currently in the A group, as we're calling it now, are able to or willing to step into that and progress
Right, because now
into
there's an
that.
extra gate, isn't there? There's
Yeah,
like a
now there's a
financial
genuine
decision to
cost
be
gate.
made.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So is that genuine cost gate going to delay people's progression, but also halt the progression of the early adopters who are currently being stung? I think that's could potentially an issue there, I think, in terms of how fast this might progress. And that's one of those kind of natural, I don't know what you call it, like natural speed bumps, I suppose, or that kind of just put the brakes on. You hear about frontier models can do X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 the world's going to change. But people on the ground have got to deal with the reality of what's happening around them. And one of them is obviously the cost and the training. And there was something else that was going on, which was quite strange, I thought, because at the same time, I was talking to people who, in a sense, weren't really doing a great deal with AI and say were struggling to understand how they move to the next level and how they stop being left behind because of this FOMO. But they were very focused on the FinOps layer and the governance layer, the compliance layer of essentially a tool set that they're not using. It's almost like the world has become convinced that this is going to happen. Right? This is happening at some
Mhm.
point, and it's going to happen to all of us. So almost ahead of that adoption, ahead of those real world use cases that many organizations haven't found yet, ahead of the ability to understand what they cost, they're trying to solve those maturity problems.
They have to. I've seen this again and again, in the real world, in, the people that we are talking to as Dutrix. This is a massive issue for enterprise. So they can't just roll something out because it's cool. right? All those questions have to be answered first. And we went somewhere a few weeks ago, and we were talking about kind of harness engineering and our sort of software factory approach, which kind of enables this agentic modern development, but with various governance gates around kind of what agents can access what, and how we can ensure, the right quality of code and the human judgment and all that stuff. So it's all kind of baked in. But we flashed up a diagram on screen to explain how this thing works, and it had a box with an agent in it. And that box left our environment and entered their environment, and there was an agent sitting in the middle. And this just freaked the room out. The conversation stopped dead at that point. We didn't carry on exploring
Yeah.
how this was going to go anymore because the word cyber came up. And as soon as the word cyber comes up, the whole tone of the room was like, right, this is going to take 6 months. If we're going to get them in the room, it's going to be a conversation that's going to take 6 months. We've clearly got to do a lot of work here. This is not going to happen. Let's look someone else. And it's sort of tied in with this, I suppose, this kind of paper Anthropic released 2, 3 weeks ago called Zero Trust for AI Agents. And there's a lot of work, a lot of talk around kind of OAuth as well, which is this authorization there that basically everything uses now, and saying, well, that was great, but it's done for humans. It's not really suitable for agents. So I think that the person or the group that came up with that have drafted something called AAuth for agent auth, right? So there's a whole bunch of work now that's going on to try and answer these questions that everyone's freaking out about, because they need the answers to this before they can, from their own governance standpoints, before they can push a lot of this forward or take it out of the proof of concept phase. They need to understand that this thing can be locked down. They need to understand what your response to threats from prompt injection are, which is a fundamental problem, by the way, that's unsolvable. So how do you mitigate against that? They need to know that the agent is not going to start deleting stuff in their environment. If it did, then and if it could, which it shouldn't be able to do in the first place, then what are the plans? So there's just a huge amount of effort going into this space at the moment. And the reason all your guys at this conference are talking about it is because they know they can't sell anything unless they solve this. All the money's like locked up until all these answers can be.
Yeah, yeah. I obviously completely agree with all of that. I think what I found fascinating was just the order in which this is happening. So when you think in terms of where these technology transitions that we've been a part of have happened previously over the last 15, 20 years, if you think about mobile technology, I guess even with laptops, but mobile technology in particular, where they were going in, people were taking them into work and forcing a bring your own device culture upon organizations. Okay. That happened before they figured out the compliance and before they figured out what the overall kind of controlling the costs of that was going to be. When when cloud happened, people were like, we have to put stuff out on the cloud. We're not running tin anymore. We're just going to go ahead and do it. And then they had to write the rules to do the compliance
I
and to
well,
figure out.
I don't
And
know.
I think maybe with cloud, maybe the focus was less on the compliance and more on the costs, right? So the big questions was, well, we don't know how to control the costs of this. It was like the FinOps piece, which lagged and came behind and enabled people
Did
to
lag, yeah.
catch up, right? So I think possibly the compliance is maybe more relevant to the mobile change and the bring your own device change. And the cost, the FinOps bit is more aligned to kind of the cloud piece. This time around, the messaging you're getting from people on the ground is we haven't yet found the real use cases, but we're sure they're there. We're definitely sure they're there. So we're going to solve all of these problems up front and in parallel, which again is the right thing to do. But it's just, I find it fascinating that that's where people have drunk the Kool-Aid so much. They're so convinced that this is coming that early investment is
I just
getting
think it's
laid out.
multifaceted. I think there's a lot going on. I wonder if, we've learned our lessons from mobile and cloud, and actually we're just being a bit more cautious now, because you're right, bring your own device did become a thing, but then MDMs came in very, very quickly and locked people down, and actually we're a lot more free now with mobile than
Mm,
we ever were when it first came out. It was
yeah.
very locked down in the enterprise, but that happened. There was a lag, right? So people went rogue. They very quickly swooped in. First of all, banned them, and then brought out MDMs and allowed them again. And then with cloud, it was like, no, you can't do that. It's what do you mean? You can't put our stuff in the
Yeah,
public cloud?
yeah,
He's like, and how is that secure? I said, well, because you leave the door open to your server room, and they've got like guards outside the data centers. Yeah, but that's not secure. And so there's a whole education piece around data centers and security, and trees worth of documents that had to be written before that was satisfied. And then the massive costs came, and then the FinOps came. That did lag, but there were those basically. There were the early adopters. It was stamped on. It was shut down. Then the governance happened, and then it was brought back in a controlled way. And I think that to some extent, yes, they're asking where the use case is. They're just sure it's there, but but at the same time, they've got this whole kind of shadow AI thing going on. So most people in the organization, if they're not allowed to use AI tools, and in a lot of the organizations we're still talking to, they're not, right? Officially, there's no policy. Officially, it's banned. But what's actually happening is everybody just wants to get their work done. So they're using their own personal accounts, a bit like they were using their own personal phones, and they're giving away company data illegally, and in violation of kind of the policies that these organizations don't have, because it gets stuff done. And of course, people are going to take shortcuts, and are going to want to be efficient, and that's why you see that these silly memes where people talk about kind of good UX and bad UX. And, they got the pavement that the cyclist goes on, then they got that bit of dirt that's scrubbed off the grass because the cyclist cuts across it. Because of course people are going to take the easiest route. So that policy lag is pain right now. Organizations are feeling that as pain because they know that they've got staff that are just sending their IP off to whichever models to get their stuff done.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the other lag that was coming across as well was the training lag. I mean, part of the reason that individuals are still in camp A, the copy and paste crew, is because they're either unaware or they haven't had the time to invest in understanding, or they've got to figure out what an agent can do for them in their own time, which, the trailblazers have all done. But anyone that needs a bit of a nudge has just got their head in the sand and just getting on with the day job. And that training piece is also lagging. That, it's one of those things that needs to be alongside the use cases figured out. But no one knows what to do. No one knows what to train because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. It was fast. It was a really fascinating conference, and I guess the thing that really stood out was the real difference between what was being said on stage and what people were experiencing on the ground. It was a bit like a few years ago. When was it? We were at some Microsoft conference, and they had Tim Peake on stage. And they were talking about that point. The big thing was about machine learning, and they were trying to get everyone to do machine learning and bring online machine learning
Yeah,
workloads into the
yeah,
good. Do you remember that? And we
yeah. I
sat in
remember
the
that.
keynote, and they put up all these stats about big orgex doing this amount of machine learning and how it's transforming their system. And everyone else is looking at each other going, what? It's so far removed from anything that's actually happening in the real world. And obviously that turned out to be a whole bunch of marketing smoke and mirrors in the main, apart from the people that were actually doing it, which is a small subset. And there's no reason for that ever to go mainstream. They completely missed out. Now, I don't think that's what's going on here, but the gap is the same. It's like there's a whole bunch of stuff that people are being told on stage is vastly different to the reality of what's happening on the ground. So lots have changed, but not a lot has changed was my takeaway from the AI summit. So watch this space to see how it evolves over 2026. So something that did
Interesting.
change recently though, over the last few weeks, Fable. Let's talk about Fable. Now, no, I'm not talking about
Do you mean the
I know
highly anticipated next computer game in the series that started in the 1990s?
I actually do mean that, and or at least I always think I do, because I got super excited because they both came out at the same time. The launch trailer for Fable, and I think it's even Fable 5 as well. This is the thing that's freaking me out. Every time I open up Claude, it says Fable 5 is unavailable. It's like, I didn't even know it was launched yet.
With Richard Eduardi's face
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
looking at you.
I know we're revealing our inner geek here. No, I'm very excited about the new Fable. I know I probably shouldn't be, and I'll be massively disappointed. I've resisted the urge to pre-order it.
Yeah, you're completely confusing most of the people listening to this now.
I know. I'm going to stop talking about that. That's not the Fable computer game, of yesteryear that's being rebirthed. Is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Fable from Anthropic, which was it still is, I guess, the latest kind of publicly available
Not
frontier
anymore,
model.
publicly, really.
So my understanding, and you might know a little bit more about this than me, Kev, mythos, is that the way you say it? I had this conversation with someone the other day about whether it was mythos or mythos or mythos, or I've
Myth
always said
my assumption is mythos, that's what I've heard, yeah.
I've gone with mythos. Okay, so mythos, right? This was
Myth and
the
fable, I mean, you can see the
I
link there,
know.
right?
Again, it's got me locked into this kind of computer gaming from the '90s world. But yeah, so Mythos was this thing a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, which was I think we talked about it briefly. It was Anthropic's super model that was going to break the world. They were terrified of it, and so much so that they only released it to a certain number of financial services companies and security companies so that they could stress test their systems before this stuff got leaked into the world. Well, then they came out 2, 3 weeks ago and said, and maybe it wasn't that long ago, was it last week? It was, I don't know, time's just blurs.
2
Anyway,
weeks, I think, yeah.
sometime recently, they came out and said, we've now got a public safe version of Mythos. And we're just putting some gates on it and some guardrails, and it'll be fine. Don't worry, it's all good. But here you go, you can all use it. It's called Fable. And a few people had a lovely time for a weekend, maybe. And then I actually missed the announcement because the first time I actually had an idea of something I was going to test Fable out on. And I jumped on the weekend and they said Fable's not available. And
Computer says no.
yeah, my instant thought was, well, Anthropic has run out of bandwidth or something because everyone's got too excited, like back in the early, image generation days. But no, it turns out the White House has said that this is a national security risk. And I think the initial request was that no non-US citizen would be allowed to access it.
US national.
US national was it? Okay, non-US national was allowed to access it. And Anthropic said, well, that's just daft. We actually can't do that. And so then they just locked it down. And have they locked it down entirely, or is it just outside of the US?
No, it's
Do we
just
know?
gone. Gone,
It's
no one
just
can
gone.
access
It's
it.
gone,
Got
gone.
just gone, yeah.
So the White House said, no, this is a national security risk. You've got to close it down. And they were forced to close it down. Despite, and again, if you look at the articles that Anthropic put out, they protested against this and they feel it was unnecessary. So there's a big kind of political element here, and who knows the truth behind it. Uh, the question I had really, I think what it really brings to the mind or brings to the fore is that when we're increasingly dependent on these companies and their supermodels and their services and the rest of it. This has always been kind of true, but anything can happen to pull the plug on that service or system that we're using. And this has always been true, but we would always kind of lean on our contracts that we had, our service agreements, whether it's 0-day data retention for safety or whether it's 24/7 uptime for, availability or whatever it was. We had these kind of bits of paper that we'd all agreed meant something. But this is a new element. This is actually something very different where a political actor has come in over the top and says, I don't care what your bits of paper say, you got to take the thing down. And this is a new world, which I wonder how this is going to affect both in the builders, because lots of people are building on this technology to bring new products to market, but also large enterprise and other organizations that are using their services to kind of run the day to day. Now, I doubt Fable itself had a massive impact. It was out for about 5 minutes. People had a play, and I'm sure didn't get the opportunity to build anything important on it that they were running their business on. But it's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah,
What?
let's unpack this because I did read a bit about this and there's layers going on here. So like we'll circle back, I think, to what it means for national security and the future of AI and maybe touch on open source. But the incident itself was interesting. So what Anthropic immediately came out and they said, we think this is a mistake. We don't quite understand why they are doing this. Apparently, some guy, and allegedly this guy was from AWS, which is kind of weird, right? Because Anthropic have a deal with AWS for hosting, but it was AWS advising the Pentagon that caused the plug to be pulled, allegedly. Um, and the story goes that they found a way to jailbreak it, and then you could get it to do some stuff that you shouldn't be doing. Anthropic's response was, you've always been able to do this with every model, and we have various layers of mitigation regardless of that. So the fact that you have found this issue should not mean that it undoes our, all these layers of kind of guards and securities. And actually, Fable was pretty locked down. People tried to do stuff with it, and it would just say no, or it would block you,
Right.
or it would refuse to even interact with you if you got nasty with it and stuff like this. So it was the most restrictive model like that they've ever actually put out. Now, whether that was Anthropic just kind of pleading the truth, I don't know, but let's just assume, let's just take them at their word and assume that it didn't need to be taken down for those reasons. We also know that there's been a huge blow up between Anthropic and the White Hat and the Pentagon over the last months. It's been constantly in the news. I think I've written 2 newsletters on it. A huge spat because Anthropic got dug their heels in and said, "Well, we don't think you should be allowed to use our models to kill people without some kind of human intervention." Which sounds like fair enough sort of ask, but the government is like, "Well, no, because AI is a national security issue, and you don't get to tell us how we use it." Which we'll get onto later. Anyway, the other argument I heard recently, and again, I don't know if there's any merit in this, but is that some Chinese state actors or AI companies, maybe they're the same thing, had figured out a way to start distilling the stuff from Fable, and that was going to give them mythos like power. Now, that's not as stupid as it sounds, because I don't know if you come across the Chinese model called DeepSeek. It's really good. Not got anything against DeepSeek. I think it's brilliant. We use it hosted on kind of US servers for some of the stuff we experiment with. But when you ask it its name, it says, "I'm Claude." So
Smoking gun.
you wonder kind of where that's come from, right? It's learned that from somewhere. So I think there is definitely a precedent here of Chinese AI companies distilling from Anthropic and probably GPT just because it's so much cheaper than teaching a model from scratch. So that might have come into the mix. Ultimately, we don't know. Is it just because there's a spat going on? Is it because there really is a security issue via this jailbreak? Is it because they're worried about China getting the leap on frontier AI? Is it all 3 of those? Don't know. But that ban has kicked up a backlash and a flurry of conversations online around, again, stuff that we've been talking about for quite some time, which is AI as a national security asset, and AI becoming the purview of governments and nation states, and being massively strategic. And the whole kind of spat with Anthropic and the Pentagon kicked all this off. So you're asking questions about, Europeans' answer to this, or Europe's answer to this. Sorry, where is it? And you got Mistral, haven't you, which is the French model, but it's way, way, way behind, like where the frontier models are, embarrassingly behind. And have we got the infrastructure? Have we got the data centers to run it? So you've got all that going on, and then you've got the open source community who are feeling pretty validated right now. And the people that have said you need to own your own AI, and you need to run local models, and you need open weights and all this kind of stuff is they're being very vocal at the moment, but they're also, there's a quiet concern underneath all of that, which is, are they next? Are the nation states going to start clamping down on them? And some people saying download all the models you can now because they might be banned in a few months' time and stuff like this. So there's a whole load of intrigue and stuff going on.
Yeah, there are layers to it. It's very difficult as well because you can see it in various countries. We've seen it recently in the UK. I mean, it's very different context, but the social media ban, for example, that have been announced or something, trialed or trailed, should we say, that's going to come in later next year. One of the things they're considering is banning the use of VPNs for certain parts of society. Now they're obviously aiming at young people to stop them getting around this social media ban, but there's nothing to say, I guess, in your version of the future that not only do they stop the download of LLMs, but they could ban the use of local models. They could build a legal frame. That'd be very difficult to enforce, but they could build a legal framework around that. Because that's just the nature of, is it overreach? I don't know what it is. I don't know what the word
Overreach was the word that I had in my head as you were you were
that,
speaking
that
then,
that's the
yeah.
nature of the conversation that this brings up, isn't it? When government and the interaction between government and businesses kind of ends up like this, there's definitely people reaching into areas where traditionally they haven't done. Whether they
Yeah.
should or shouldn't, or allowed or not allowed, is a different conversation. But they haven't done that before, and they
And it's
appear
really
to be doing
worrying
it
as
now.
well because, the people that come up with these policies, they understand so little about tech. And
Hmm.
it's often completely disastrous because they just don't get sometimes what's possible, but more often what's a very narrow view on a far more complicated problem or question. This whole kind of ID thing, for example. So let's look at the social media um ask here is okay, well you can't use it unless you're 16, right? So how do you prove you're 16? Um Everybody needs to now declare their age on all these services. Okay, and how do you prove that you don't have nude photos on your phone? Well, everybody needs to have some smart surveillance software on their phone which allows us to check all their photos. What? It's like, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
So the answer in making us all safer is to force us to take digital ID, because I think this is probably just another way to get digital ID in the back door, which we know this government's trying to do, right? Because they've done it to businesses already. If you're
Mhm.
a director, as we know, you
Yeah.
basically have to have one of these things. So it's coming, isn't it? And they're just trying to find a way to make it palatable. And then, um, yeah, like they've been trying to get rid of encrypted end-to-end encryption on devices forever. I think they might have even succeeded, and the tech companies have been pushing that back against that for ages because it's really freaking dangerous, right? If the government have our keys, I don't really, do you trust them not to lose them or get hacked, or why are they somehow more? Should I trust them more with my security than, I know, Microsoft or OpenAI or Anthropic? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those questions that we're going to get very political now. But I saw someone was talking about this the other day, where they was talking about passing laws and people trying to pass laws which favour them. And we see it quite a lot in the States. But this is an interesting thing. Would you be comfortable with your opponents having the powers that you've just given yourself?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a really interesting, particularly in a democratic world in which we have the privilege to operate in. It's a really interesting weight to kind of, or a lens to see these things through. I trust the current government to not lose my keys? I don't know the answer to that question. But the point is, I don't know who the next guys are. What are they going to do with them? Because they're going to have all the same powers that we just granted in this lot.
But I think the overarching thing here is if you're not careful with technology, your attempts at protecting people can end up doing more harm than good in the long run, because you're unleashing something you do not understand, or you're trying to prevent something in the wrong way. Now, I am largely in favor of kids not accessing social media, right? Because I think it's a fine. Like, I don't like social media anyway, right? But also, there's all kinds of negative things there. So my knee jerk reaction would be, yeah, ban it. I'm in support. Great. But then you start digging into this, and it's like, well, I'm not so sure. Kids are allowed to play in the park, but someone just the other week fell off one of the monkey bars and broke an arm, right? So do we just ban parks because they're dangerous? They're dangerous places, right? The places where people hang out, and they're clearly dangerous. So do we ban parks? Or do we go to the parks with our children and make sure we're there for them when they have to fall, and and help educate them about the dangers? And the interesting thing with social media is, yes, it's murky and we want to protect our kids. But what happens at 16? What happens at 16 when they've not had to deal with any of this, and then suddenly it bombards them all at that point? I mean, they're still young and vulnerable at that point. Your brain isn't. I don't think you're really an adult until you're kind of in your early 20s, are you? But anyway, yeah, probably getting far too political now.
Getting to the edges here, but I think it's related because fundamentally, it's a technological question, and a communication question. So whether it's the power of AI or the role of social media, that term is misleading, because they're not actually talking about social media. They're talking about algorithmic media. That's actually what they're talking about. But they're trying to educate the customer or the client, the general public, in a way that they're going to get on board with. Social media isn't the problem. That was never the problem. All these things happened when Instagram became an algorithm, and then everyone copied it. I mean, it's algorithmic media that's the issue, but that is a whole level of education that, or if the government understands, they're not able to communicate or even willing to try. And also, there's competing dangers here. On one hand, and they cross them over. So on the one hand, they're like, well, it's about stopping kids talking to strangers, and on the other hand, we're stopping kids seeing harmful content. And on the next bit, it's like, well, how do we protect them from their constant dopamine addiction? It's like they're three different issues, guys. It's not all to do with social media, which is not really what you mean anyway. Anyway, comes back to the point that the technology is indecipherable to most people, I think. And so we're so dependent on what we're being told, A, by the people pushing it, and B, by our overlords in various governments. So if the government does say you can't use that local model anymore, or you can't use this frontier model anymore, or you can't use this kind of technology anymore, everyone has to fall in line. And I think when it comes to this AI question, and when people are trying to figure out how to deploy it within their organizations and where to build their next product on it, all that kind of stuff, what are people supposed to do? The obvious, I guess, is
Mm,
don't get tied into a single model, which is difficult, I think, for a lot of organizations who can only buy Copilot or whatever.
mm,
But how do you navigate this inherently risky space? If you end up in a situation, now, again, very difficult with Fable, it was around for 10 minutes, but let's say you'd built a business critical system that sat on the capability that you got from using Fable with the appropriate harness that you'd put in place. And Fable gets pulled overnight for some unknown reason. Doesn't matter. How do you protect yourself against that? You got a problem if you find yourself in that situation. So is that a point even considering, or is that actually just that comes out in the wash because that's not really how it
Oh,
works
no, so it's
anyway?
absolutely worth considering. So you shouldn't build your AI systems around a particular model. I don't believe that at all. But you will optimize for a particular model, definitely. So there needs to be some flexibility there. It's interesting though, like as you were talking, I was thinking about the parallels with cloud, and we as an organization pushed for, in the earlier days, we were very much no, multi-cloud is a mistake because you can't leverage the benefits of the cloud computing platform if you're trying to split it across multiple clouds, because you're having to create two competing infrastructures. And then at the time there was Kubernetes, which was, well, everything's just a Dockerized container and you can run it anywhere. It's levels and levels more complicated, but it allowed you to run your infrastructure on multiple clouds, which you're looking at the world today and you're kind of thinking that's not a bad move, is it? Yeah. And yeah, so what are the learnings we could take? Well, does it make sense to lock yourself into one model? No, not at all. Does it make sense to understand the whole spectrum of what's going on here with frontier models and local models, open weights models that you run in the cloud, because they still need massive infrastructure, versus local models which you can run on your own hardware? I think it makes sense to look at the whole landscape right now, because there's something unfolding here and we don't have the playbook for this.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw somewhere recently that for the first time in a long time, the number of products or services that are going into your own tin. People are building data centers again, or at least little boxes under desks again,
Mm.
because of this political potential. You don't know that the American cloud is going to get turned on or off, or whatever your regional distinction. That lack of control, whether it's America or somewhere else, has become a risk that's being labelled in people's business
It's
plans.
like it's like someone stuck the globalization car in reverse, right?
Mm.
And now we're trying to untangle everything and deal with the consequences.
Yeah, yeah. Watch this space, I guess. See where it lands.
Mm.
Time for one more.
Yeah, I think because we touched on the local AI stuff there, didn't we?
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk Apple. Apple's come back from the dead. They've got AI again and other things. This we do Apple.
They've got AI. They've got Google's AI, haven't they? They've basically gone all in with their own hosted version of and customized version, I would imagine, of Gemini, which is a master move by Google, right? Because I think it's fascinating that if you look back, Apple and Google emerged as the kind of masters of mobile, right? They weren't mobile companies. The mobile companies were Nokia and Symbian and BlackBerry and and out of nowhere came these two tech companies and they dominated the mobile landscape. So, not the companies you would expect. And then we've ended up in a situation now where you've got Anthropic, who are they? And OpenAI, who are they? Completely dominating the AI landscape. And the big tech companies are left kind of in the dust. And Google is weird because it kind of is and kind of isn't. Google is the odd one out, right? Because I think they are behind in one sense. Nobody's really using their frontier models to do, the coding stuff that we're living and breathing. But Gemini is everywhere. It's in everything. It's on all of the Android devices. Now it's on all of the Apple devices. So it's the default AI when you go to search something on Google on the web, which everyone still does. So
Yeah.
everyone is using Gemini. It's just they don't really know that they are.
They've done an incredible job in I guess it's productizing the thing, isn't it? Anthropic to a certain extent and OpenAI have both been so focused on benchmarks and moving, creating exciting new frontiers and all the rest of it. And Google's like, well, we're just going to plug it into this product to make some money. And I know it's not quite that simple, but it feels like they've learned the lessons from their journey, through search into, Gmail and then images and then, obviously doing their own servers, all this kind of stuff. They've learned all the lessons and said, okay, right, well, this AI space, we just got to wrap it all in so that the customer doesn't care what model they're using. They care about the
I'm
output they get
actually,
from the other side.
and I'm actually really impressed with the way they've made it work with search. Because, like, in one sense, it's two distinct experiences, isn't it? When you type into that Google box now, you kind of get the AI results at the top, which you can sort of drop down, and then you can interrogate it further in kind of an AI chat window, or it rolls back up and you've got your search results. And I think that works really well, right? Because you've got your cited content
Mm.
that you can go, you go straight to the source, or you can just ignore the AI stuff and go straight to the source, or it can help surface a lot of that information in a much more palatable way that you can then start interrogating. I think I kind of assumed they just wouldn't get that right, but I think they have got it right. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, I don't know how it still works in the States because they, for a while at least, they rolled it out so that was the default view, was that you didn't get the search results. You went to Google and you just got the AI bit. And then I had an option a little while ago to switch and I neglected to. I declined. But I don't know if that's actually what they've landed on or if this is the new default because it does seem to work quite well.
But they've still made it work with citations and links and their
Mm,
ad systems, and that's where all the money's coming from. I guess from a business sense of view or point of view rather, it'd be interesting to understand the financial hit, right? Does
right.
Because now they're having to spend all this extra money on compute. Does the ad model still kind of make sense, given that that's how a lot of people are now using Google? And are they still, because the cost of running the thing would have gone up, presumably.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know. Guess that'll come out in the wash just to try to capture the user base at the moment, aren't they? I mean, if everyone's default search experience did move to ChatGPT, they'd lose in the long run, right? But if they could
Yeah.
hold everyone onto Google, then ChatGPT won't ever get a foothold in that sense.
But yes, Apple have finally got AI, sort of, apart from if you're in the EU, where they still don't.
Yes, well, that's a
So
sore topic,
this is
isn't it?
such a
Yeah,
mess. It drives me it drives me mad. And this is quite a political episode, this, isn't it? 'Cause
it
it's quite
is. I
difficult
know. We're
to
going to get
avoid
banned.
now. And I was listening to the European Parliament guy talking about the whole Apple debacle, and he was saying, look, they had 18 months to tell us how they were going to deal with this kind of um, digital management rights thingy, because the EU is saying it's it's okay to do this, but you can't have an unfair advantage, right? So tell us how you're going to open up your ecosystem to allow other AI inference possibilities. And I guess Google must have done this, right? Because you can use Gemini in the EU, so Google must have done this. But Apple just said, "Oh, we'll ignore you, we'll ignore you, we'll ignore you, and then we'll ask for an exemption." To which the EU went, no. And so now we don't have Siri AI. It's ridiculous. It's a standoff between the EU and Apple, and this has happened obviously several times in the past. But again, I can see both sides of the argument here because I've had it in my head for a long time now that AI isn't just a thing, isn't just a tool. It's completely transformative, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years from now, AI is indistinguishable from the operating system that we use. Right. So nobody is saying to Apple, or nobody would ever say to Apple, you need to be able to install a different operating system on your iPhone, right? But they are saying you need to be able to swap out the AI stuff. And I think that's probably unfair because if you're building a platform for the future where your AI is going to become more and more and more of your platform, you can't just swap that out because then it's not your platform anymore. So again, I think this might be an area where there's a sort of overreach because they're not fully understanding where this technology is
Mm.
going and what's in people's heads. And now I'm just, we are stuck in the middle as consumers. And I'm like, yes, but regardless, as a consumer, I would like the choice. You're trying to protect me as a consumer and saying, well, you want to give me the choice to swap out my AI. But I'm saying I'm a consumer and I don't want that choice. I want to buy the phone with the AI. So you're actually taking away my choice now. And actually, it's going to become untenable to carry around a phone in your pocket which can't do this stuff. And so you're going to go to a competitor.
There is precedent for it, though. I mean, and I think it is rooted in a lack of understanding. I think it comes back to our communication conversation we had earlier. When they got involved with the browser, a few years ago, when effectively, the browser was the operating system for the web, right? And that's what it was becoming. But obviously, they laid into Microsoft the old antitrust stuff about decoupling Internet Explorer from Windows. They fundamentally missed the point, I think, that Microsoft and Google the same with Chrome and Gmail and Google Search. They missed the point that these companies were trying to make the case that the browser was the operating system for the web. And you're right, they would never say, well, you're not allowed to only have Windows on your machine. But they didn't make that leap, or the tech companies were unable to make the case that, well, this is just the same. This is our operating system for this new piece of hardware, which is the web. And I think that's the challenge that we're going to go through again, particularly with where I believe Apple is going, is essentially all of us who have got iPhones and Apple devices are going to have local LLMs in our pockets. So Siri AI is just going to run locally, and only in very crazy cases is it going to reach out to somewhere else. What do they do then? Because you're right, in that case, the AI is the operating system that's going to run the whole thing.
And this is happening, right? So I
Mm.
actually pushed out an article this week called Cloud 2.0, which talks about how these local models and these frontier models are all going to kind of work together, and there's going to be kind of this world, this ecosystem of technology that's building up around it, like the early days of the cloud and the maturation of the cloud. And you're right, you can't separate that. That becomes the world around your device is the OS, it is iOS, or it is Android, and you can't just swap that out. It's a system of systems, and they all talk to each other. Um, and I just don't think that most people think that big or that broadly about AI. They don't realize that AI is that fundamental, or is gonna change software as much as I believe it is gonna change software.
Mm. Yeah, and it's up to the big tech companies to make that case and try and educate the guys to make the rules in the way that they want to make the rules. Who's to say who's right? But at the moment, they're failing to make that case, and particularly in the EU. And I'd imagine a lot of that is, EU-US antagonism is obviously fueling that. They're not exactly in the mood to cooperate right now, which is probably holding back the whole conversation. Yeah.
Interesting. What a
Amazing.
time to be alive.
Yeah, what a time to be alive. Well, on that bombshell, I think that's the pod.